The office building stood tall and quiet at the end of the business district. During the day, it was full of noise, phones ringing, people rushing through hallways, and meetings that stretched for hours. But at night, after everyone had gone home, the building changed. The lights were dim, the air was still, and the silence felt heavy, almost like it was holding old secrets inside. Every night, just after 10, a woman entered the building through the side door. She wore plain clothes and carried a small bag with her cleaning tools. She did not rush. She did not talk. She simply nodded to the security guard and walked inside, like she had done hundreds of times before. Most people in the building did not even know her name. To them, she was just the cleaner. She moved from floor to floor, emptying trash bins, wiping desks, and mopping floors. She worked carefully, never missing a corner, never doing anything halfway. Her movements were quiet and practiced, as if she had learned long ago how to stay unnoticed. Sometimes she paused to rest her back for a moment, placing a hand on the wall and taking a slow breath before continuing. On the top floor was the main office. It belonged to the man who owned the company. During the day, people spoke his name with respect and fear. He was known as a strong leader, someone who had built everything from nothing. His office was large, with glass walls, a wide desk, and shelves filled with awards and framed certificates. Many employees dreamed of sitting in that chair one day. The woman always cleaned his office last. She unlocked the door slowly, stepped inside, and closed it behind her. She turned on a small lamp instead of the main lights. The soft glow filled the room, making the place feel less cold. She began with the usual tasks, wiping the desk, arranging papers, and cleaning the floor. But unlike the other offices, she spent more time here. She noticed every detail. The way the chair was pushed back when he left late. The coffee cup left empty near the edge of the desk. The framed photo placed face down in one corner. She never touched that photo, but her eyes always moved toward it. Sometimes, she stood there quietly, holding a cloth in her hands, lost in thought. Her face showed signs of a hard life. Fine lines marked her skin, not from age alone, but from years of worry and struggle. Her eyes carried a sadness that never fully left, even when she tried to hide it. The man who owned the office had never really noticed her. He came early in the morning and left late at night. To him, the office was always clean when he arrived. The trash was empty, the desk spotless, the air fresh. He assumed it was just part of the job, nothing more. But there were small things that began to stand out, though he did not realize their meaning yet. One morning, he found his desk arranged differently. The papers were stacked neatly in a way that made his work easier. A pen he had been looking for days earlier was placed right beside his notebook. Another day, the plant near the window, which had been dry and dying, suddenly looked healthy again. He brushed these things off. He had more important matters to think about. Deadlines, meetings, deals. His life moved fast, leaving little room for quiet thoughts. The woman, on the other hand, lived slowly. After finishing the office, she sat for a moment on the chair near the door. She did this only when she was sure no one would come. She looked around the room as if it were familiar, like a place she had once belonged to. Her eyes stopped at the shelves, then at the desk, and finally at the window that overlooked the city lights. Outside, the city never truly slept. Cars passed, lights blinked, and people lived their lives, unaware of the silent work happening above them. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. It was worn at the edges, as if it had been opened many times. She unfolded it slowly and read it again, even though she knew every word by heart. After a few seconds, she folded it back and placed it inside her bag. Before leaving, she wiped the desk one last time. Her hand lingered on the surface, just for a second. Then she turned off the lamp and walked out. At home, her life was simple and hard. She lived in a small place on the edge of the city. The walls were thin and the nights were often cold. She cooked basic meals and slept little. Most of her money went to things more important than comfort. There was someone depending on her, someone she never spoke about at work. Each night, as she prepared for another shift, She reminded herself why she was doing this, why she cleaned that office so carefully, why she kept coming back even when her body ached and her heart felt heavy. The office was not just a workplace to her. It was a reminder of a past she could not forget, no matter how much time passed. One evening, the routine broke. The man stayed late, much later than usual. He sat alone in his office, staring at the city through the glass walls. A long day had drained him. He loosened his tie and leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes for a moment. He did not hear the door open. The woman stepped inside, stopping when she saw him there. For a second, neither of them moved. The silence felt uncomfortable, heavy. She lowered her eyes quickly and apologized in a soft voice, saying she would come back later. But before she could leave, his eyes caught something. Her face. There was something familiar about it. Not enough to place it, but enough to make him pause. She looked tired, yet strong. Her hands were rough from work, but she held herself with quiet dignity. He nodded and told her to continue. He picked up his phone, pretending to be busy, but his attention kept drifting back to her. The way she worked, the care she took, the way she avoided looking at the desk photo. When she finished, she left without another word. That night he stayed thinking long after she was gone. He could not explain why, but a strange feeling settled in his chest. Like a memory trying to surface but not quite ready. Neither of them knew it yet. But their quiet connection had already begun to change everything. And the truth, buried for years, was slowly making its way back into the light, night after night. She returned to the office building, moving with her usual quiet determination. Each evening, the city outside seemed to settle into its own rhythm, with lights blinking, cars passing, and distant voices carrying through the streets. Inside the building, however, the silence remained, a calm bubble surrounding her as she made her rounds. She began on the lower floors, sweeping the hallways and dusting the shelves. Her movements were precise, almost like a dance. She had learned to work efficiently over the years, yet she always carried a sense of care that went beyond routine. No corner was neglected, no detail overlooked. She was thorough, not because anyone would notice, but because she believed in doing things with honesty and integrity. Every sweep of her cloth, every push of the vacuum. It felt like a small act of dignity she gave to herself and to those who would come after. By the time she reached the top floor, the office owner's floor, she slowed down. Here, her work was different. She didn't just clean, she observed. She noticed the faint fingerprints on the glass walls. The small scratch on the desk that wasn't there yesterday. The slightly crooked stack of papers. Each detail spoke to her, telling stories she would never reveal aloud. She felt connected to this space in a way that went far beyond her job. The desk was always spotless when she started. Yet she rearranged it with care, aligning papers, placing pens at the edge just so, and ensuring the chair was at the perfect angle. She never touched the photographs on his desk, but her gaze lingered on them. Some of the images were of awards and achievements, and some were of people she had never met. One, in particular, drew her attention every night. It was a photo of a younger man and woman, smiling, holding hands. There was something familiar about the way they stood, the way they looked at each other. A silent story embedded in the photograph that pulled at her memory. She would pause. Just for a few seconds, letting her fingers brush against the desk, feeling the smooth wood, tracing the lines and edges. She thought about the people who had worked in this office, the decisions made, the late nights, the triumphs and failures. She wondered if he knew the weight of the space he occupied, if he understood that walls could hold memory, if he realized that silence could speak volumes. Some nights she left little things behind. A pen placed on the desk in a specific spot, a stack of papers aligned to make the morning easier. A small plant moved slightly to catch better light. These were small gestures, but they carried meaning. She didn't do them for praise or reward. She did them to honor something long lost, something she hoped to one day see acknowledged. Outside the window, the city hummed softly. Streetlights reflected in the glass, forming a grid of gold and white lines. The distant sounds of the subway echoed faintly, and somewhere, a car alarm blared for a brief moment before silence returned. In these moments, she felt a strange peace. The office became more than a workplace. It became a place where she could reflect, where she could breathe, and where she could confront her past quietly alone. The man, unaware of these small acts, continued his life above her. His days were full of schedules, meetings, and responsibilities. But he began to notice subtle changes. Papers that used to be misplaced were now always in the right spot. A cup of coffee he had left sitting on a coaster would be replenished without a word. His desk seemed more inviting, organized in a way that eased the stress he carried daily. He didn't know who was behind it, and at first he assumed it was luck or the diligence of his office staff. But over time, he realized that no one else had access to his office at night, and that these small details could only come from one source. Curiosity began to grow in him, a small, persistent itch at the back of his mind. He started to stay late occasionally, pretending to finish work, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was responsible. One evening, he arrived earlier than usual, determined to uncover the mystery. But the moment he entered the office, he froze. She was there, moving quietly, dusting the shelves with meticulous care. She didn't notice him at first. Her focus was absolute, her concentration unwavering. He observed her silently, noting the precision in her movements, the way her hands worked with care, and the gentle tilt of her head when she noticed something out of place. There was an air of dignity about her, a quiet strength that drew his attention more than he expected. He realized that this was not just a job for her. This was a ritual, a way of living, a way of expressing something she couldn't say in words. He wanted to speak but found himself hesitating. The moment felt fragile, as if any word could shatter it. So he stayed back, watching her, trying to understand who she was and what drove her to care so deeply about a place that wasn't hers. She paused briefly, glancing toward the window. The city lights reflected in her eyes, and for a moment, he thought he saw a trace of sadness there, a hint of longing or regret. He couldn't be sure, but it was enough to make him sit down quietly at his desk and watch. Time passed slowly. Neither moved, yet both were aware of each other's presence, connected in a way neither had expected. After finishing her tasks, she picked up her bag and prepared to leave. Before she could, the man spoke softly, almost uncertainly, asking if she had been working in the office every night. She hesitated, then nodded. There was no fear in her eyes, just a quiet honesty. She explained in her simple words that she tried to make the office comfortable for him, to care for it the way he might not notice. She didn't reveal her past, not yet, but her voice carried a depth that made him listen closely. He thanked her, though it felt inadequate. The truth was, words weren't enough to express the mix of gratitude, curiosity, and something deeper stirring in him. He realized that this woman, who had been invisible to the world around her, had been quietly shaping his space, his environment, and in some way his life. That night, he left the office later than usual, his mind alive with thoughts he could not fully articulate. Who was she? Why did she care so deeply? And what story was she hiding in the quiet corners of his office? Meanwhile, she walked home through the empty streets, her bag heavy on her shoulder, but her heart lighter. The city was asleep, but her mind was awake, replaying every moment she had spent in the office. Each night, the connection grew stronger, though neither fully understood it yet. She cleaned not for recognition, not for reward, but because it was a way to honor the past and the people who mattered silently. The next morning, as the man arrived at his office, he noticed the small details she had left behind again. Papers aligned perfectly, a pen in place, the chair at the perfect angle. But now, he saw them differently. Each small act felt like a message, a silent gesture that spoke to something beyond the routine. He began to sense the depth of her presence, the patience, and the care embedded in her work. Over time, this realization grew. He found himself looking forward to nights when he might glimpse her, when he could see the quiet dedication that had been shaping his office for months. He began to respect her work in a way he had never respected anything else in the office. Not because it was his, but because it came from someone who saw value in the small, unnoticed details of life. For her, the office was more than a place to clean. It was a space where she could express herself silently, honor a past long hidden, and care for someone in ways words could never reach. Each night, she carried her heart into the office. And each morning, she left it behind, trusting that one day her work would be understood. Her efforts, seen for what they truly were, the bond between them, unspoken and delicate, began to grow. Not through words, but through actions. Through care, attention, and the quiet rhythm of shared space. And though neither could predict the future, that bond would eventually change both their lives in ways they could never have imagined as the nights went by. The man began staying later in the office more often, drawn by a curiosity he could not ignore. He watched her work quietly from the corner of his room, amazed at the care and attention she gave to everything. It was not just cleaning. It was a way of putting order into a space that carried years of effort, achievements, and sometimes failures. He saw how her hands moved with skill and precision, how her eyes scanned every corner to make sure nothing was left unattended. There was patience in her, a quiet strength that fascinated him. One evening, he arrived unexpectedly early. He had been caught up in meetings all day and had not seen her the previous night. When he opened the office door, she was already inside. She froze for a moment when she saw him, and for the first time, her mask of calm professionalism faltered. Her eyes widened slightly and her lips pressed into a thin line. But she quickly regained her composure and returned to her task. He stood there quietly, unsure if he should speak or wait. He realized he wanted to know more about this woman who had been silently impacting his life without him noticing. The tension in the room was not uncomfortable, but it was charged with something unspoken. Her presence was powerful, even in silence. And he felt drawn to understand the person behind the careful gestures. She continued cleaning, but he could see the subtle changes in her expression. Sometimes, she glanced at the photographs on his desk, lingering a moment longer than necessary. He noticed the way her fingers brushed against the edges of the frames, almost as if touching the past itself. He wanted to ask questions, but the words would not come. There was respect and hesitation in him. He did not want to intrude, yet he could not ignore the growing connection he felt for her. The office was a place of reflection and careful observation. Each night, she relived moments in her mind, remembering the events that had shaped her life. Some memories were painful, others bittersweet. She thought about choices she had made, opportunities lost, and people she had cared for deeply. The office allowed her to channel these emotions into her work, turning cleaning into a quiet ritual of expression. She worked slowly that night, paying special attention to the details. She rearranged papers, wiped surfaces, and dusted shelves with meticulous care. He watched, realizing that her dedication went far beyond what any job required. She was not seeking recognition. Her work was a testament to her own values, a reflection of who she was. At one point, she paused and looked out the window. The city stretched below them, lights twinkling like stars scattered across the ground. For a brief moment, her gaze was distant, as if she were thinking of a time and place far away. He noticed the subtle sadness in her eyes and wondered what story lay behind it. There was a depth to her, layers he could sense but not fully understand, and it intrigued him. He decided to speak softly, not wanting to startle her. He asked why she took such care with his office, why she spent so much effort arranging things just so. Her response was quiet and honest. She explained that she believed in caring for the spaces she entered and making them comfortable and welcoming. She spoke of small gestures, of details that often went unnoticed, and of the satisfaction that came from doing work with love and attention. There was no complaint, no demand for praise, only a simple truth conveyed with sincerity. He listened, captivated by her words and the calm strength behind them. He realized that her presence was more than just helpful. It was transformative. The office, which had always felt like a place of work and responsibility, now carried a sense of care and thoughtfulness that he had never noticed before. He began to understand that the impact of her efforts went beyond cleanliness, touched the atmosphere, the energy, and the feeling of the space itself. In the following days, he found himself paying closer attention to the changes she made. The pens he had lost in the clutter were always in place. The chair was perfectly positioned, and the stacks of paper were arranged in a way that made his work easier. These small details began to feel personal, as if she understood not just the office, but his needs, his habits, and even the rhythm of his days. He wondered how she could know so much about him without ever speaking to him during the day. One night, curiosity overcame his hesitation. He stayed in the office until she finished her work. When she turned to leave, he asked if he could accompany her to the front door. She nodded, surprised, and they walked together in silence through the empty hallways. The quiet was comforting, almost sacred, and it allowed them to exist in the same space without the need for words. It was in these moments that a silent understanding began to grow between them. As they reached the lobby, he finally spoke again, asking about her life outside the office. She hesitated, then shared small details: where she lived, the challenges she faced, the reasons she worked so hard. Her story was simple yet profound, marked by perseverance, resilience, and a quiet determination to live with dignity despite hardships. He listened intently, realizing that the strength he had observed in her work extended into every aspect of her life. He felt a growing admiration, not just for her diligence, but for her character. There was honesty in her actions, integrity in her choices, and a sense of purpose that inspired him. For the first time, he saw her not as a background figure, part of the building's routine, but as a person of depth, courage, and humanity. He wanted to learn more, to understand the experiences that had shaped her into the woman she had become. That night, as she left the building and walked home, she reflected on their brief interaction. She had always been cautious, keeping her life private, but she sensed a genuine interest and respect from him. For the first time, she considered the possibility that her efforts had not gone unnoticed, that someone had recognized the care she put into her work. It was a small, quiet hope, but it made her heart lighter. Meanwhile, he stayed in the office long after she had gone. He thought about the subtle ways she had influenced his environment, the thoughtfulness in every action, and the resilience reflected in her story. He realized that the connection between them was growing, a bond built not on words or social convention, but on mutual understanding and respect. He began to appreciate the power of small gestures, the significance of care, and the way a person could impact another life without seeking recognition. Days turned into weeks, and their silent relationship continued to develop. She maintained her nightly routines, and he continued to observe, learning to notice the subtleties that made her work extraordinary. Each interaction, each glance, each shared moment of silence strengthened the bond between them. It was unspoken yet deeply meaningful, testament to the power of quiet dedication in human connection. One evening, he decided to leave a small note on his desk before leaving for the night. It was simple, expressing gratitude for her efforts and acknowledging the care she had shown. When she arrived the next night, she found the note and paused, touched by the acknowledgement. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than words could express. She smiled softly to herself, feeling seen for the first time in a long while. From that moment, their relationship changed subtly. There was an unspoken understanding, a mutual respect, and a recognition of each other's humanity. He began to see her as more than a cleaner, more than a background figure. While she began to trust him in small ways, sharing glimpses of her life and allowing herself to be present in the space they shared, the office became a place of quiet connection, where two lives intersected in unexpected ways. It was a reminder that even in the busiest, most impersonal environments, human beings could find understanding, empathy, and respect. And though the full truth of her past remained hidden, the bond they shared grew stronger with each passing night, preparing the way for revelations that would eventually change both their lives forever. As the nights grew longer and quieter, the man could no longer ignore the curiosity and the strange pull he felt toward the woman. He realized that her presence in his office had become more than a simple routine. It was a connection that intrigued him and unsettled him in ways he could not describe. He began to think of her constantly, wondering what had shaped her life, why she carried herself with such quiet dignity, and why she seemed to care so deeply about a place that belonged to someone else. One evening, he stayed late again, pretending to review documents. He watched her move gracefully around the office, noticing how her hands moved with skill, how her eyes carefully scanned the room, and how she seemed to breathe life into the space simply by being there. There was an air of patience in her, a calm determination that he could not fully understand but deeply admired. Every night she left subtle signs of care, small gestures that transformed his office into a place that felt alive and welcoming. That night, he decided to take a different approach. Instead of observing silently, he tried to engage her gently, asking questions about her life and her work. At first, she was cautious, her voice soft and measured as she answered. She did not reveal much, only small details about her day-to-day life, where she lived, and how she had learned to work with such precision. But even in these brief exchanges, he sensed a depth of experience and resilience that fascinated him. She had endured hardships, yet she moved with a quiet strength and a sense of purpose that left an impression on him. The more he learned, the more he realized that she carried a heavy past. There were traces of pain in her eyes, subtle lines of worry on her face, and a certain guardedness in the way she spoke. But there was also hope, a determination to create something good in her life despite the challenges. He began to understand that her meticulous care for his office was not just about work. It was a reflection of her values, her character, and her ability to find meaning and dignity in small, thoughtful actions. One evening, as she reached for a stack of papers, her hand brushed against a photograph on the desk. For a moment, her eyes filled with tears, and she quickly looked away. The man noticed but did not comment, understanding that some memories were private, and some moments were too personal to intrude upon. Yet that brief glimpse of emotion revealed more than words ever could. It told him that her connection to this office, and perhaps to his life, was deeper than he had imagined. He began to reflect on his own life, the choices he had made, the people he had known, and the regrets he carried. In watching her, he realized that he had taken many things for granted, had overlooked the small acts of kindness and care that went unnoticed in the rush of daily life. Her dedication reminded him that life was not just about achievements and deadlines, but about the quiet, meaningful gestures that connected people in unexpected ways. As days turned into weeks, he became more intentional in his interactions. He left small notes of gratitude, prepared a cup of coffee for her when he stayed late, and occasionally offered a kind word or smile. She received these gestures with quiet acknowledgement, her own smile softening the lines of exhaustion and worry on her face. Slowly, a bond formed, built not on conversation alone, but on mutual respect, recognition, and the shared space they inhabited. One night, as the office lights dimmed and the city below slept, he took a chance. He asked her if she would tell him more about her past, about the experiences that had shaped her. She hesitated, then shared a story of struggle and resilience, of hardships endured and lessons learned. She spoke of a family she had lost, of challenges that had tested her spirit, and of moments of loneliness that had taught her the value of quiet perseverance. Her voice was calm, yet carried the weight of years spent surviving and finding dignity in small acts. He listened, captivated not just by her words, but by the strength and humanity behind them. He realized that she had been shaping more than his office. She had been shaping his understanding of empathy, patience, and respect. He saw in her a mirror of courage he had long admired, but seldom recognized in himself. The nights continued, and their connection deepened. He began to anticipate her arrival, to notice the subtle changes she made, and to find comfort in her presence. She, in turn, grew more at ease with him, sharing more of herself in small ways, a smile, a comment about the city, a brief story about her day. It was a delicate dance of trust and recognition, a bond that neither fully understood but both valued deeply. Then, one night, a discovery changed everything. While cleaning, she found an old document tucked behind a shelf, something that had been forgotten for years. It contained records, letters, and photographs that linked her to the office and to the man in ways neither could have anticipated. The documents revealed connections, memories, and truths that had been buried, waiting for the right moment to surface. She realized that her life and his had intersected long before she had taken the job as the night cleaner, and that the office held keys to a story that had been left unfinished. When she showed him the documents, he was stunned. The truth was more profound than he had imagined. He learned about sacrifices she had made, challenges she had faced, a connection to his own past that he had forgotten or overlooked. The realization hit him with a mix of awe, regret, and gratitude. He understood now why she had cared so deeply, why her presence had seemed so significant, and why her dedication had been so unwavering. The revelation brought a new level of understanding and empathy between them. He saw her not just as a diligent worker, but as a person with a rich and challenging life. Someone who had endured and survived with remarkable strength. He felt a responsibility to honor her story, to acknowledge her sacrifices, and to recognize the depth of her character. From that night onward, their interactions changed. There was no need for elaborate gestures or words. The understanding between them was silent but powerful. He adjusted the office in ways that made her work easier. He listened when she shared small details. And he began to see the office not just as a place of business, but as a space where lives intersected, where stories unfolded, and where quiet acts of care could transform more than just a room. In turn, continued her work with renewed purpose. She had always cared deeply, but now her actions were infused with a sense of acknowledgement and partnership. The office became a sanctuary, a place where trust and respect were tangible, where the weight of past struggles could be honored, and where the future could be approached with hope and understanding. The bond they shared grew stronger, built on shared recognition, mutual respect, and a deep understanding of each other's humanity. It was a connection forged not through grand gestures, but through the quiet, persistent acts of care, empathy, and integrity that defined their interactions. And as the nights continued, both of them realized that the office, once just a workplace, had become a space of profound connection, healing, and shared purpose, preparing the way for the final chapter of their intertwined lives. The night had grown deep and quiet. The city below, settling into its usual rhythm of distant sounds and blinking lights. Inside the office, she moved with her familiar precision, carefully wiping the desk and arranging papers. But tonight felt different. There was a weight in the air, a sense of anticipation she could not explain. The man had stayed late once again, observing her from his chair, silently reflecting on the connection that had grown between them over these long nights. After weeks of quiet exchanges, small gestures, and shared moments of unspoken understanding, the time had come for truth to surface. She had shown him pieces of her past, but much remained hidden, and he sensed that the final revelation would change everything. The office had become more than a place of work. It had become a space of trust, vulnerability, and emotional honesty. Both of them felt it, though neither spoke it aloud yet. As she finished dusting the shelves, she paused by the window. The city stretched before her, lights twinkling like distant stars. Her eyes reflected a mixture of resolve and apprehension. She had carried her secret for years, and now she knew she had to share it. She turned to him, her voice quiet but steady, and began to speak. She recounted the experiences that had shaped her life, the challenges, the losses, the sacrifices she had made. Her words were simple, but each carried a depth of emotion that resonated in the stillness of the office. He listened intently, absorbing every detail. The strength and resilience she had shown throughout her life were awe-inspiring. He realized that the acts of care she had shown in the office were more than just diligence. They were expressions of her courage and integrity, reflections of a life shaped by struggle and perseverance. For the first time, he understood the depth of her presence and the significance of her actions as she spoke. He recognized the subtle ways her past intersected with his own life. There were connections, hidden threads, linking their experiences in ways he had never imagined. It became clear that their meeting was not mere chance. It was the convergence of lives that had been shaped by circumstance, resilience, and quiet determination. The realization filled him with a mixture of wonder and humility. He saw that her influence extended beyond the office walls, touching his understanding of life, empathy, and human connection. Once she had shared her story, a silence fell between them, profound and charged with emotion. He wanted to respond, to express the gratitude, respect, and admiration he felt, but words seemed inadequate. Instead, he reached out gently, placing a hand on hers. The gesture was simple, yet it carried everything he could not say: acknowledgement, appreciation, and a promise to honor the trust she had placed in him. In that moment, the office felt transformed. No longer just a place of work, it had become a sanctuary of understanding, a space where two people could meet not just as employer and employee, but as human beings recognizing the strength and dignity in one another. The bond between them, formed in silence and small gestures, had matured into a relationship defined by trust, respect, and shared humanity. The days that followed were filled with subtle changes. He took steps to make her work easier, ensuring the environment she cared for was comfortable and supportive. He listened more attentively when she spoke, showing interest in her life and her thoughts. They shared quiet moments, sometimes in conversation, sometimes simply in presence, each aware of the deepening connection. She, in turn, continued her nightly routines with renewed confidence and purpose. Knowing that her efforts were valued and that her life and story were respected, as their trust grew, they began to collaborate in small ways. He shared insights about his work, allowing her to understand the decisions and responsibilities he faced. She offered practical suggestions and observations. Her attention to detail and empathy, providing perspectives he had overlooked. The office became a space of cooperation, learning, and mutual support, reflecting the unique relationship that had developed between them. One evening, she found an old envelope tucked in the corner of a drawer, a remnant from years past. Inside were letters and notes that revealed more about her history and her connection to the office. She shared them with him, and together, they pieced together a story that had remained hidden for too long. The discovery brought clarity, closure, and a deeper appreciation for the resilience and courage she had demonstrated throughout her life. The man realized that the office had been more than just a workplace. It had been a stage for her silent acts of care, a place where her strength and compassion were quietly expressed and eventually recognized. He understood that he had been given a rare opportunity to witness and honor a life of quiet dignity and to learn from it, in ways that would forever change his perspective. In the weeks that followed, their connection continued to strengthen. They shared stories, insights, and moments of laughter and reflection. The office, once a place of routine and work, had become a space of personal growth, emotional resonance, and meaningful human connection. Both recognized that their lives had been enriched by the encounter, and they approached each day with a renewed sense of purpose and appreciation for one another. Finally, one night as she prepared to leave, he stopped her at the door. With a sincerity that reflected the depth of his respect and admiration, he thanked her not just for the work she had done, but for the example she had set, the lessons of perseverance, integrity, and compassion that had quietly shaped him over the months. She responded with a soft smile, acknowledging the recognition, and for the first time, felt a sense of fulfillment and closure she had long sought. The story of the cleaning woman and the office owner had reached its culmination. It was a tale not of grand gestures or dramatic revelations, but of quiet dedication, resilience, and the power of human connection. The nights she spent caring for the office had been acts of love and integrity, and the recognition and understanding he offered in return completed the circle of trust and respect. Together, they had transformed an ordinary space into a place of meaning, connection, and healing. In the end, both of them knew that their lives had been forever changed. The office had been more than a job, more than a workplace. It had been a bridge between two souls, a testament to the enduring strength of quiet actions and sincere hearts. And as they faced the future, they carried with them the lessons learned, the trust earned, and the profound understanding that even the simplest gestures, performed with care and honesty, could leave an indelible mark on the world, on each other's lives. The story of the cleaning woman and the office owner did not end with the acknowledgement of her hard work or the discovery of her past. Life, as it often does, continued to move forward, bringing new challenges, opportunities, and deeper layers to their connection. The nights in the office, once defined by routine and quiet care, now held an added significance, a space where shared understanding and trust had grown into a meaningful relationship. She continued her nightly work, but now with a different feeling. Each step she took, each surface she wiped, carried the knowledge that her efforts were recognized and valued. The office had always been a place of meticulous work, but now it also held a sense of companionship and mutual respect. She no longer felt invisible. Her presence mattered, and the acknowledgement of her dedication filled her with quiet satisfaction and renewed purpose. The man, too, felt the change deeply. His days were still filled with work, decisions, and responsibilities, but his perspective had shifted. He saw beyond the immediate demands of his role and began to notice the importance of empathy, patience, and human connection. Observing her, interacting with her, learning from her subtle gestures had opened his eyes to the power of quiet influence, the strength of resilience, and the depth of care that often goes unnoticed. One evening, after she had finished her tasks, he invited her to sit for a moment. There were no papers to review, no tasks to complete, only a quiet space and the opportunity to share thoughts. She hesitated initially, unused to such attention without purpose. But then she agreed. They sat together in the soft glow of the lamp, the city lights reflecting through the glass walls. It was a moment of pause in the rhythm of their lives, a chance to be present without expectation. He asked her about her dreams, the things she had hoped for in life beyond the office, beyond work that often went unseen. She spoke softly, sharing memories and aspirations, some fulfilled, some deferred, and some still held close to her heart. There was humility in her words, yet also a quiet determination and strength that made him listen intently. For him, it was a revelation not only of her character, but of the resilience that ordinary people carry in ways that often go unnoticed. In turn, she asked about his life outside the office, about the choices he had made and the paths he had taken. He spoke openly, sharing regrets, successes, and moments that had defined him. For the first time, he found someone who could listen without judgment, someone who could see him not just as a boss or figure of authority, but as a person with vulnerabilities and dreams. The conversation was simple, yet it held depth, mutual understanding that grew stronger with each word spoken. From that night onward, the dynamic between them evolved. Their interactions were no longer limited to work and routine. They became companions in understanding, learning from each other's experiences and perspectives. She continued her nightly tasks, but now with the knowledge that her presence mattered not only for the upkeep of the office, but for the enrichment of his life and her own. The subtle gestures, the alignment of papers, the care of the plants, the attention to small details were acts of love and dedication that extended beyond duty. The office itself seemed transformed. It was no longer just a space for work. It had become a place of reflection, connection, and growth. The objects within it, the desk, the shelves, the photographs carried, stories, memories, and lessons. Each evening, as she worked and he observed, they both felt the weight and significance of the environment they shared. It was a living space, shaped by their actions, emotions, and mutual respect. Weeks passed, and their bond deepened. They shared moments of laughter, stories from their pasts, and quiet reflections on life. There was a rhythm to their interactions, a balance of giving and receiving, listening and speaking, observing and understanding. The office became a sanctuary, a place where the pressures of the outside world were held at bay, replaced by the simplicity and authenticity of human connection. One night, a challenge arose that tested the strength of their relationship. A sudden crisis in the office demanded immediate attention, disrupting the routine and creating stress. The man was overwhelmed, faced with decisions that could have significant consequences. She stepped forward, offering practical assistance and clear insight, using her knowledge of the office and her understanding of his work habits to help him navigate the situation. Her calm presence and thoughtful guidance provided clarity and reassurance, demonstrating the depth of her influence and the value of her quiet strength in the aftermath. He reflected on the role she had played, not merely as a cleaner, but as a trusted confidant and partner in navigating complex circumstances. He recognized that her actions, her insight, and her unwavering dedication had been a source of support that went far beyond the tasks of cleaning. The realization filled him with gratitude and respect, deepening the bond they shared. With the crisis resolved, they returned to their nightly routine, but with a renewed sense of purpose and connection. She continued to care for the office with meticulous attention, while he approached his work and interactions with a broader perspective, informed by empathy, patience, and recognition of the value of human effort. Together, they had created an environment that nurtured not only the physical space, but the emotional and psychological well-being of those who cued it. As the months went by, their understanding of each other grew even stronger. They began to anticipate each other's needs, offering support without being asked, and recognizing the significance of small gestures. Their communication extended beyond words. A glance, a smile, a careful adjustment of papers or objects conveyed understanding and care. The office, once a mere workplace, had become a shared canvas of trust, respect, and mutual growth. One evening, she revealed a long-held aspiration to pursue further education and skills that had been deferred due to life's challenges. He listened, encouraged, and offered practical support, understanding the importance of nurturing her ambitions. This act reinforced the depth of their connection, demonstrating that their relationship had evolved beyond routine tasks into one of mentorship, support, and genuine care for each other's well-being and future. The story of the cleaning woman and the office owner, which had begun as a simple routine, had now evolved into a profound narrative of human connection, resilience, and empathy. Each night, as she worked and he observed, they were reminded that meaningful relationships are often built not on grand gestures, but on consistent acts of care, recognition, and understanding. Their shared experiences had transformed both their lives, leaving lasting impressions and creating a legacy of respect and connection that would endure beyond the walls of the office, in the quiet of the office. As the city slept below, they both felt the significance of their journey. The lessons learned, the trust established, and the understanding cultivated had brought them to a place of mutual respect and deep appreciation for one another. It was a story of endurance, care, and the power of small, meaningful actions to create profound change. And as they continued their work side by side, they carried with them the knowledge that human connection, even in the most unexpected places, can transform lives and reveal the extraordinary within the ordinary.